Republicans reacting to what was a wild week at the White House? One of Trump's closest confidants, Hope Hicks, calling it quits. The president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, losing his top secret clearance amid increasing ethical scrutiny. President Trump's surprise decision to slap tariffs on steel and aluminum imports, sending Wall Street into a tailspin. The list goes on and on. Let's talk it over with Republican strategist Alice Stewart, former communications director for Senator Ted Cruz's 2016 presidential bid, and Republican Ken Blackwell, the former domestic policy advisor for the Trump transition team and former Ohio Secretary of State. Thank you both for being here. Ken, I'll start with you. What stood out to you from Trump's wild week? Tariffs, ethics, strained family relationships, or something else?
Well, you know, it's a matter of style and what Washington is accustomed to. We have a president that has led a tightly held family-controlled LLC, never had to deal with a publicly traded company that had a board of directors and shareholders, and so the lines of authority were pretty direct and very, very clear. Now he's running what we could say is the largest publicly traded company in the world, in the federal government. So it is a clash of styles and what it has been considered to be the norm in Washington. I think he has a management by chaos style. It is nothing new and shouldn't be surprising. And so I anticipated that the churning in this administration would be much more rapid than the previous administrations.
So do you think it's working for him then, if this is a management by chaos style?
Well, I look at his agenda. I mean, his agenda is moving. He, in fact, accomplished a lot with his management of the tax policy initiative that has accelerated economic growth, has increased jobs, has bumped up labor participation, and he's changed the flow of capital back into this country where there is business expansion and the workers are realizing bonuses and raises in income. So, you know, by measuring the agenda and the time frame, it's working. But it has kept a lot of folks off balance, both inside the White House and outside the White House.
Well, there have been a ton of turnover inside the White House. Go ahead, Alice.
No, I was just going to say, Ken is exactly right. I mean, we all knew, based on the president's history, that he ran his businesses leadership by chaos, and we're seeing the exact same thing in the White House. And a lot of people, especially those on the left, say, you know, the chaos at what cost? But the reality is we're talking a lot about the palace intrigue and the high staff turnover, and that list that you gave at the top of this segment of all the chaos going on this week. I travel the country talking to GOP groups, and they're not focused on this. They're focused on, as Ken said, his agenda and what he will do next. And Grant, I think that the tax reform plan, the tax cut plan was great, and they're looking at what is he going to do with guns, the gun policy and addressing gun violence. That is extremely critical. So if we're talking just about his base, they really, truly don't get caught up in the day-to-day palace intrigue at the White House. They're looking more at policy and...
How can the Republican Party focus on anything right now? Because the president has been all over the map this week. Even what he's saying on one particular policy seems to change the next day. We have Republican lawmakers calling the meeting on guns surreal, thinking that he's all of a sudden sounding like a Democrat. You have the tariffs announcement, which our reporting has, as we've reported, he's got members of his administration that have threatened to resign over that. You have the fourth communications director for this White House resigning this week, who we know was a loyal supporter of the president. And you look at this Politico cartoon here, and it shows a little bit about just how many communications directors have left. Alice, why? Why are these people jumping ship?
Well, the question is, are they jumping ship or are they pushed out, you know, based on, you know, the president not being satisfied with them anymore? And you raised some good points. Those two issues that you talked about with regard to the steel tariffs. He came out and mentioned the fact that he wanted to impose tariffs on steel imports, which that goes along with a campaign promise he made to support American steel manufacturers, which is a great idea. However, the rollout of that, I think they could have done a much better job of explaining it much more. They plan to do that in the near future, but there's clearly backlash. The markets have taken a tremendous dive, and there's going to be some pushback. While this may help the Americans, those who manufacture steel, those who use steel in their manufacturing their goods, those will be hurt. So steel manufacturers will benefit in the short term, but those who use it will hurt in the long run. As for the gun violence, yes, it has been a concern for NRA members like myself and gun owners, what he plans to do. But having talked with people that have visited with him personally, he is dead set on making sure that we do take action to reduce gun violence in schools and elsewhere. And that goes with strengthening background checks, hardening schools, which I think is a great idea, looking at banning bump stocks, and also taking a close look at how we deal with mental health issues. And the key is keeping guns out of the hands who will be harmful to themselves and others. So right now he's in the listening phase. Hope they narrow it down and get to some real solutions to address this serious problem.
And we saw it with immigration, the round table that got a lot of blowback, the president shifting opinions. Ken, do you see it turning out different this time on the issue of guns?
Well, I really do. I think let me say that I think the president, he is the message. And General Kelly is managing down. He's not managing up. You're not going to control this president. This president will lead. And I think in the final analysis, we will be looking at the problem. You know, and the problem is a cultural problem in our country where we have cheapened life. If, you know, life has been cheapened, and we have to address that. We should be concerned about whether people are killed by guns, cars, or knives. The fact is a cheapening of life and a systemic breakdown that has to be done. This kid should have been flagged, and he should have been given care in Florida, and he wasn't. And we can't act as if the gun was the problem. The problem was a system failure. And the president is concerned about that.
There was something else that came out this week that I want to get your thoughts on as an African-American supporter of the president. This poll from the AP and NORC that finds 57% of Americans believe President Trump is a racist. What's your reaction?
Well, that is troubling, and I don't believe that to be the case. Look, he is not politically correct. He, in fact, can say things in a very direct and artful way. But the reality is, take a look at his policy agenda and what that impact has had across the board on blacks, whites, men, and women. It's an agenda that facilitates economic growth. It pumps up, job opportunities. And it is one that has basically said all Americans are safer when you stop the hollowing out of our military and you put us on solid footing where he can lead in the two areas that presidents can lead. That is affecting the direction of our national economy and securing the safety of Americans both at home and abroad.
Alice, why do so many Americans believe the president is a racist?
Well, like Ken said, he's not politically correct in a lot of things that he says. And look, I'll agree. I don't approve of his tone and tactic on things, but I do support his policies. And to be quite blunt, he is an equal opportunity offender. He calls it like he sees it with everyone. And if you take a closer look at that poll, the numbers really reflect the number of people who are
He doesn't call it like
overall,
he sees it, though, with Putin when you talk about the Russia election, Russia election meddling in the U.S. election.
Yeah, sadly,
well,
that's true.
Let me give you perspective. I think Homeland Security and a whole host of other players, major players, are taking a look at the vulnerabilities in our system. They're working with the secretaries of state and election officials across the country. One of the benefits of our system is that it's decentralized. One of the challenges of our system is that it's decentralized, and it forces collaboration and cooperation. And I think that what's been placed in motion is a system that will facilitate that sort of collaboration. There's an understanding that our system is vulnerable. It's vulnerable to the Chinese. It's vulnerable to the Russians. And what we need is a commitment to deal with those vulnerabilities. And I think we have that from this White House.
Alice, what about the family situation in the White House right now with all of the headlines, the investigations into Jared Kushner's financial ties, his family's ties, his meetings with foreign officials that come around the time that his family business got loans, and then on top of it, Ivanka Trump's business ties to the Trump Tower and a hotel in Vancouver, Canada, rather, is also under investigation by the FBI. At what point is he going to say, my family is hurting me more than they're helping me?
I wonder if we'll ever get to that point, Anna. I think this is the classic reason why we have nepotism laws and keeping immediate family members out of these types of high-level positions, given the questions about the financial ties and whether or not they fully sever them. And a concern I see is the 4 countries that have said that they had intentions of trying to capitalize on the fact that Jared is vulnerable with regard to his inexperience and his business struggles that his family business is having. That being said, anyone who thinks that the president is going to put them outside the White House, especially in light of Hope Hicks leaving this week, I think is mistaken. He trusts them. He values their opinion. They're well respected and liked within the high levels of the administration. Despite all of this concerns about the financial ties, I don't see them going anywhere. And I believe if he was going to do it, he would do it himself with regard to the family members and not put it off on John Kelly. But who knows? Who knows? It's hard to predict this wide area.
Real quick, Ken, I'll let you have the last word, and then we got to go.
She is absolutely correct. This is a Trump model which has not been seen before. It started with the campaign. As my colleague can tell you, he ran a different sort of campaign, and he is now running a different sort of White House. And I just believe, as I told you before at the beginning, his style has come from his experience. And like me, I'm about much younger than the president. We're set in our ways, and the style that he understands is a very streamlined administration where there's a tightness that is underscored by family. And so I agree that they're not going anywhere, but the chief of staff will, in fact, make sure that there's integrity in the process of vetting.
All right, Ken Blackwell and Alice Stewart, thank you both. I appreciate your thoughts.
Thanks, Anna.
Thank you.